Hey everybody, it's Dr. Corey with Pinnacle Chiropractic and Wellness. And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about a case that I had where I talked to a father and he had brought in his child, kind of at the insistence of the mother, but he brought in his child and he was really confused. He was having a hard time kind of putting it or wrapping his mind around why he was in the same place for his child's behavioral disorders and developmental disorders as he was for his low back pain. It didn't make a lot of sense to him why he would come to the same person for that. And I totally get that. I can understand why that would be kind of hard to wrap your head around. So the conversation that I had with him really started with, those old radios and the tuning dials, right? So you turn the little dial, and what happens when the dial gets further and further away from that perfect position, right? You start to hear a lot more static. So the same thing can be said with the spine and the brain. So the further that the spine gets from that perfect position and perfect function, the more static starts to come across in the messages between the brain and body. So it's really just about the communication between the brain and body and making sure that it's perfectly tuned in, because it's really important to how the brain develops in a child. These children, so when I say developmental disorders, what I'm really talking about, if you're not familiar, and I'm sure most of the people watching this video are, but what we're talking about would be like autism spectrum disorder, ADD, ADHD, just behavioral disorders, things of that nature. What we know about that as just the clinical field, what medical doctors know about that, pediatricians, behavioral therapists, we know that it's a stimulation issue in the brain, right? So we know that it's overstimulation of certain parts of the brain that cause the brain to develop a little bit differently and leads to these developmental disorders. But really what they're all trained to look at is looking at, where's this overstimulation coming from? So is it coming from is there dyes in their food, or their food allergies or food sensitivities, or is it some tactile thing with their clothing, or is it overstimulation from too much screen time, or you hear all these things over and over, things that may be contributing. And it's true, your environment is super important when it comes to brain development in children. The environment is huge. But what people don't look at, or what those clinicians are not, they're just not trained to look at, is stimulation from the inside. They're all looking at things in the environment and things, what outside the body could be causing that overstimulation. What we're trained to look at as pediatric chiropractors, and we're the only profession trained to look at it, is what if that overstimulation is coming from the inside, right? Coming from inside the child's body. And overstimulating the brain with that static, that message, right, between the brain and body. So why that's so important is because, according to Nobel laureate Irvin Kaur, about 80% of the stimulation to the brain comes from the inside, from the spinal cord, from the spinal positions, spinal movements. All that provides tons of stimulation to the brain, as your brain is always gauging your spine's position. So we're really the only profession that's built for checking to make sure that that stimulation isn't coming from, the overstimulation isn't coming from the inside of the body. Everybody else is great at looking at the outside, and that's super important, like I said. But a lot of times looking at the inside out is really just, that's the missing piece of the puzzle in a lot of these cases. Dr. Kathleen will oftentimes see children that are working with behavioral therapists and occupational therapists and pediatricians, and they're trying to help these kids, and really just plugging in that last piece of the puzzle and making sure that the brain's ready to receive the changes outside, that really make that case click and let that child really thrive and develop. What's cool about this is that it's not guesswork. We can measure it. It's just like going in and measuring your cholesterol, right? We have the technology behind me here. We do a couple of scans that help measure the input and output from the brain to the body, and we can tell you on that very first visit if your child's input and communication between the brain and body is working pretty normally, if it looks normal, or if it looks like it is overstimulated, and this could be a contributing factor. But it's great. We can take one scan and tell you if it's normal or not. We can go through some care. We can take a second scan and we can tell you how adaptable your child is. Is it changing quickly? Are they coming out of it quickly? Or is this something that's deeply seated that's going to take some time to break out of that pattern? And then on the third scan, we can start to draw trend lines. Is it improving? Is it staying the same? Is it getting worse? And we can really answer those questions for a lot of these parents. So if you have any other questions about this kind of stuff, if you would like a little bit deeper explanation, we kind of just glazed over why it's important. But remember, 80% of the stimulation to the brain comes from inside the body. And as pediatric chiropractors, we're the only ones measuring and paying attention to, is that stimulation coming from the inside that's causing your child's brain to develop differently. So yeah, give us a call. You can check us out online, www.pinnacleatgeist.com. You can find us on Facebook, or you can give us a call here in the office. Thanks for tuning in.